Okay, our next topic will be discovery and exploration. It'll be in at least two, more like three uh, videos because I have to stay under a size limit on these things. Later on, you can have 30 minutes or whatever. I've seen whole feature length films. I'm a beginner, so I can't do more than 15 minutes. I don't know quite how that works. Okay, discovery of America, the discovery of America. There are plenty of people already here, as we determined. So, time was everybody knew that Columbus discovered America in the year 1492 because they'd been taught a little rhyme when they were in grade school. It may sound familiar. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. What a thing. What if it had been the next year? No, we would still be in business. Try this. In 1493, Columbus sailed the boundless sea. Not too bad. What if it's the next year? In 1494, Columbus reached the foreign shore. Not too bad. I really never come up with a good one for 95. Like in 1495, Columbus made it back alive. That's not that good. In 1495, Columbus did the jungle jive. I think maybe he did. Anyway, for a long time, it was just the major thing in Columbus's historical resume that he led the first ever European expedition to come to the New World. Now, I seriously doubt that anybody today actually cares about that, but it's kind of hard to let go of. But you take the question, kind of turn it upside down, whether he was or not. If he wasn't, who was? Do we have any confirmed, independently corroborated proof of prior European contact? Well, turns out that would be a yes. And nobody knew about it until the 19th century, even though it happened much earlier. Here's the deal. In the ancestors of the inhabitants of modern countries like Norway and Denmark, back around, I don't know, 1,200 years ago, they're generally just peaceable people. They're dairy farmers and so forth. They didn't have a strongly centralized government, anything like that. But they learned how to build really fast, very seaworthy ocean-going vessels. They're long, narrow. They got a prow. They got a square sail. There's no place on one of those things to get in out of the rain. They got a big old dragon's head on the front. And they're called Norsemen or Northmen or Vikings, which may have been a verb in the summer of the young men would go a Viking. Well, they began terrorizing the coastlines of Northern Europe, the British Isles, France. They're into the Mediterranean. They seem to be everywhere. Some of them stayed on land and moved several hundred miles to the southeast and established a village on the banks of I forget which river it is out there, and they call it Muscovy. Yes, it's now Moscow. Anyway, Viking raids aborted an early recovery from what's called the Dark Ages. They kept an oral history, an oral history of their exploits in long narrative poems known as sagas. That's where we get that word. And given that there's not a whole lot to do for entertainment, they're sitting around the campfire. Somebody who had a knack for it would get up and repeat one of these sagas. There were any number of them. And since everybody heard them all any number of times, if the one repeating the saga makes a mistake, he's going to hear about it. So they probably held up pretty well. Anyway, several hundred years later, these people got a written alphabet called the Cyrillic alphabet. It's the one the Russians still use. And the old sagas were written down, so we still have them. But they were in North European languages, and nobody bothered to translate them into other languages until about the 19th century. So here it is, the 19th century, and translators are updating the Norse sagas so people in other parts of Europe can read them. And they ran across some stuff that, shall we say, made their eyes get big. I want to interject here. I was in a bookstore in Stephenville several years ago, and here's this big old brick of a paperback book, and it was the Norse sagas. I've wished ever since I bought it. I sampled it a little bit. It's pretty much like your grandmother's diary, you know, who murdered whom, who stole whose cow, who ran off with whose wife, that kind of stuff. Anyway, what one of these sagas reported involved a man named Bjarni Herjulfsson, who had a ship and he was trying to sail from Greenland to Iceland. You need a backstory on that. Iceland is an island far to the north. It's mainly volcanic ash and ice, appropriately named, and a Norwegian named Eric the Red had colonized it during the Dark Ages, and then later he went on to colonize the coasts of Greenland, which is interesting because it's been many centuries now since people without modern technology could even survive on the coast of Greenland. It's the world's largest island. In the middle of it, the ice cap is over a mile thick. But apparently, from the year 1000 out to 12, maybe 1300 people could live there. There are remains of their settlements. Okay, Bjarni Herjulfsson, the name is in the supplements, he's trying to sail from one to the other. He doesn't have a compass. He doesn't have a GPS device. Gets blown off course and sailed until he saw land he didn't recognize to the west. What could that be? Probably what's now known as Labrador. He all he knew is wasn't where he wanted to go, so he didn't go ashore or anything. Turned the ship around, made his way back to Greenland, and the story went around. By the way, naming a place like that, Greenland. Is there a realtor in the room? that's false advertising on purpose. It really was. Okay, this was in the year 986. Okay, a few years later, a man named Leif Erikson, might be Leif, I'm not sure, son of Eric the Red, thought he'd check it out. So he purchased Bjarni Herjulfsson's ship, hired about 30 other dudes to go with him, and they sailed out to see if they could find what was reported. And they did. They found a coastline. They had to sail up and down it quite a bit to find a place suitable to go ashore. Finally, they did make a landing, and Erikson brought back just a glowing story of how green it was and balmy the climate was. This is where the wheels came off, okay? Grapevines growing in abundance. They actually called it Vinland or Vineland. They said the grass stayed green through the winter. That's the problem. Everything else could kind of work, but go up and check out the wine industry in Labrador. Not many people live there. It's pretty harsh. Anyway, this was just this tantalizing what if, hanging out there for upwards of a century. If this is true and not somebody just making something up and getting lucky, that means the Vikings came to North America about as many years before Columbus as Columbus is before us, roughly the year 1000. Okay. What it was waiting for was independent corroboration, something to corroborate it from some other source. That finally happened 60 years ago in the year 1960. A Norwegian archaeologist, they won't leave us alone, will they? There's Norwegians everywhere. And his wife, his name was Ingstad, something Ingstad. His wife was Anne Stein Ingstad. They discovered what was confirmed as the ruins of a Norse village or Viking village on the very northern tip of the island of Newfoundland off southeastern Canada. A place with an odd kind of half English, half French name, Lance aux Meadows. Okay, not much to see. You can tell they're foundations of stone buildings and such, other artifacts that could be dug up, consistent with Norse technology of about the year 1000. So that does it. The Vikings came. Now, we don't know anything else. We don't know if that was Leif Erikson's village. We don't know if there was a serious attempt at colonization or just a few. They might have stayed one generation, 50 years. There are people that think that Vinland reached all the way down to what's now New England, and that the Vikings penetrated far inland, just didn't leave any trace. Think about traces. That's an odd one, because evidence could be found, but if it is not recovered and documented by a trained archaeologist, it doesn't count. There's some stuff there that if it did, it would change the picture. Okay, so Europeans, we know, were here about 400-500 years before Columbus. but they left so little trace it took almost a century to find it. So that does not take anything away from the significance of Columbus's discovery. Why? Because the Vikings, to paraphrase Caesar, they came, they looked, they left. They were a long way from their base of supplies. They had a bad habit of getting in fights with each other, and they had no particular advantage over the Indians, whom they called Skraelings. Love that word. All right, so Columbus' discovery is more significant than any previous contact simply because it, unlike the others, it led directly to the conquest of the Americas by Europeans. Quarter of a millennium after Columbus, the entire Western Hemisphere was claimed, if not governed, if not inhabited by Europeans and their descendants. So, yes, it's extremely significant. Now, next, before I get to Columbus himself, I want to talk about what did Europeans know about world geography in the late 15th century while Columbus lived before his discovery. There's a commonly believed myth that they believed that the world was flat. Some of them may have. Educated people have always understood it was round. Kind of tell that by looking at the moon. So that's not something that was new. Although I'm told there are sincere, convinced flat earthers today. They're out there. I'm going to show you, I'm going to see if I can get this to work. I haven't got it to work yet. A map, a world map prior to Columbus's time, but within decades of it, late 15th century prior to his discovery. So if you're seeing that map, look at it and decide whether you think the person who drew that map understood that the world was flat or round. Well, the trick to making a map where you project the surfaces of a curved surface onto a flat surface is that it cannot be done without distortion. So you pick your distortion. So you look at that map, and it looks like modern flat world maps. If you notice the cross-hatching on it, it's got a grid on there. That's just on maps. But the lines extending from the north to south pole are called longitude lines. They're used to determine how far east or west you are. The parallel ones that run east and west are latitude lines, north and south. It's already on there. By reference to latitude and longitude lines, each with a circle, it's a circle divided into 360 degrees, minutes, and seconds. You can pinpoint any place on the world, in the earth. So it's got that. The northeastern part of it, if you know what you're looking for, you can see the Mediterranean Sea, West European countries. You got Italy, a little bit too horizontal. You got the British Isles. You got Arabia, the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, Caspian Sea. After that, they're making it up. Africa doesn't really turn out west like it shows there, nor does it connect with an Antarctic supercontinent. The farther the east, they don't know. It just kind of goes off the map there because they really don't know. Some of these older maps, I'm told, would have a device or symbolic representation off the west coast of Africa out in the ocean, which was labeled as the gates of hell, representing the belief that they thought the actual physical portal to the bad place lay off equatorial Africa. So that's what we're going on. And since I won't be able to finish the next one, I'm going to quit this one off and come back with some new sources of information that were available by the time Columbus lived.